Hello, my name is Brant. My channel here is Discerning What is True. And what I wanted to talk to you about today is my trip to the Georgia Guidestones that I took off yesterday, and took about a little over 2 hours trip to part of Georgia, a town called Elberton, Georgia. It's actually north of Elberton, Georgia. That is, the monuments. The reason why they did this, I think the guys, he called himself R.C. Christian, but that was just that wasn't his real name. It was just a synonym type of deal. Not even a synonym, it's just basically a facade. But anyway, I don't want to get into that. But the point simply is that it was advantageous to put it here because the granite is mined in this area. So it would be easy to transport, supposedly. And the city of Elberton, or town of Elberton, is known as the granite capital of the world. And it's a special granite. It's blue type, and it's used throughout the world. So so they mine it. They have the transportation system comes through there. The railroad comes through there, so they can move it, heavy haul it, or whatever, and be used elsewhere. As I was making my trip going northward, there were all kinds of buildings, metal fabricated buildings, that were basically, what I could see, were small businesses that were cutting up this granite for customers. And some of this granite is probably used in the cemeteries. In fact, I'm pretty sure it is. The way it's cut, everything in a smaller size, but I'm sure they have customers throughout the world, or here in the United States for sure, that does this for monuments in a cemetery. So this is where the granite comes from, or what we call the old word for it's tombstones, so to speak. So what did I encounter when I was there? Well, I read these things about the Georgia Guidestones, so I'm well aware of that. The reason why I went up there was first of all was to see if I could find if this area was what I would call an energy center. That is, if the ley lines were in this area, and that was my hope, to find out that was it located there. You see, in other words, is it, can I feel it? And I took I had boots, and then I transferred my boots off and put on what I call moccasins to walk out into the field where it was at, hoping to feel some type of energy there. And I didn't feel anything. There was no energy there. So I was definitely disappointed, hoping that would be helpful for me. Simply is that it would be beneficial for my health to be in that area. I know that there's ley lines that go in this area close by, and I'm going to have to order a book, looks like, and find out where these ley lines are. There's one that goes north, basically out from the coast of Miami, and goes northward at a certain angle, and it goes through the Georgia western part of the state, cuts across Florida and comes across. And then there's another line, but I don't know if this line is real, is to do with the 33-degree parallel line going from east to west. Now, I'm looking at where what I've discovered from what Victoria shared with me, that is Victoria Levy, to do with what we call the 33-degree. The people who are born there and somehow has a lot to do with their personality and who they are, their makeup, and their astrology. And I wasn't born on the 33-degree. I was born on the 32-degree, further south of that, in a small town called Hampton, South Carolina. But I was disappointed in the issue of trying to find a ley line. And so I'm going to have to find a book, order a book, that is, and try to find where it's at, because I'm not that far from it. And so the other thing before I get, let me just say one quick thing. the interesting thing about the city of Atlanta, Atlanta's name has not always been Atlanta. It was first a railroad area. That is, the two railroads came across it, and it became a junction, and it was called Marthaville. Is what it was called. And so before the Civil War, whatever time phrase it was known as Marthaville until that time period, because then suddenly it becomes to be known as Atlanta. Atlanta, I think, has a lot to do with the Atlantis, the name Atlanta. And Atlanta is considered probably in the Southeast, the major hub. In fact, it is the major hub. All kinds of transportation comes in there. Airport, actually, Atlanta Airport's probably the second largest in the country, if not the largest, because of the other cities such as New York having three airports, breaking up the passenger list. But Atlanta is a major hub, and it's a major hub in the Southeast. That is transportation, that is with airplanes, but also it's interesting that railroads came through here, as I mentioned, and then what we call the interstate system comes through here. You have I-85, you have I-20, you have I-75. Those are all three major interstates that come through there. Then they either go, like I-75 goes north, it goes from south to north. I-20 goes from east to west. And then I-85 goes from what we would call from the northeastern sector to the southwestern sector of the country. 85 is actually, I think, the oldest interstate besides I-95 in through this whole area where I live at. 95 it doesn't go through Georgia, but it goes through what I call to Florida. That was what we call the Yankee Freeway. We Southerners call it that. It's the Yankee Freeway. And so, but the idea was also hopefully to meet someone who was seeking answers. That was the second reason why I went there. This is the second time I've been to the Georgia Guidestones. I've been there before, been there in 2015. I was just curious if, when I was there the first time was many people were there, and most of them were there because of Alex Jones. Alex Jones either had talked about this issue, and it was being prominently pushed by Alex Jones at that point beforehand. It's not as much talked about by Alex Jones anymore. And I'm not here about Alex Jones. So don't get me wrong. I'm not, pushing his program because I don't agree with what he does, but there were people there. And I remember there were more people coming there at that point. That doesn't mean anything about what transpired yesterday. I remember that I went in the summertime, but it was not as hot as it was yesterday. Yesterday was a hot and humid day. And as I shared on Facebook that I ran into two major thunderstorms, and we had to all leave because they actually started raining where the Guidestones were. I actually passed this place yesterday. I missed it. It is that obvious if you, and I don't use a phone tracking system or whatever you call it to find places. I usually use a map. So I'm old school, but they don't show the map. They don't show this on the map, so to speak. But I'd already been there before, and yet I missed it. So that'll tell you how easy it is to miss, because it's actually on a hill, and if you're not looking for it, you won't find it. So I was there, met some people. I was there by myself for a while, and then a couple came up. And I introduced myself, and we talked for a little while. And it didn't take long, just simply as I knew their background, especially the woman. They were from Easley, South Carolina, which is in the northwestern sector of South Carolina. So their trek was a little shorter and easier than mine, because they basically got on I-85 and came down and got on the secondary road and drove back down. But it was very quickly, the lady said this was Yahweh's prediction, such and such, and he's in control and all that type of thing, which is in the South is usually you don't use the word Yahweh, but this is what the teachings has become, that they do understand that Jesus' word, Jesus, that is a Greek word. So they use the word Yahweh instead of Jesus because they see Jesus is a Greek name. And they're right. That's correct. But they go off on a tangent here and say, this has all been predicted, such and such, da, 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 da. And so my instance simply is that I could sense that when I dialogue with her, she was already closed-minded. So there's no sense in communicating to her. She knows it all, and that's fine. That's just nothing wrong with that. That's her journey. I met the husband, who was completely opposite personality-wise, and very soft-spoken, and actually was not from this area. He was actually from the state of Minnesota. So I talked to him about that and shared such and such, but it was never on a deeper level. I backed away from both of them, but basically from her. And then there was roughly probably 10 or 12 people came up. Of all the groups, I'm the only one. I'm trying to think. There was another guy who came up just the last part as I was not leaving, but in that vicinity of time, that was single, and I was single. So the rest were either someone was traveling with them or couples. And so I remember a couple that came out in a nice car and were there for less than 5 minutes. They went to it, looked at it, took pictures, and that was it, and they went right back to their car. So they were gone. I never even got to meet them. So then I met an older man. He told me his age was 80. He was from we talked about childbirth and all that issues. And he said he was home birth. He was actually part of that. And I tried to talk to him a little bit about some of these things and what it meant. And meaning that simply is that, that many, people need to know simply is when you go in a hospital nowadays that you're in the system. And so, but anyway, him being older, and he brought I think his granddaughter is what I could tell, because she was I'm guessing she's less than 18 years old. And there was no dialogue between me and her whatsoever, communicating simply is that she didn't have any interest. And it was a matter probably, he asked some questions. And one question was simply is, why was the Chinese part of because there are 8 languages here that are put up. So this is the reason why. English and Chinese are the 2 major languages throughout the world. You have Chinese, which is over 1 trillion people. And then you have the English, which is part of the England's and America's and what we call economic power throughout the world, has brought in what we call that even Chinese have people, in order to work in the economic sphere, they have to know English. And so these are the two major languages. And so the other languages are there. The other language is Spanish. The interesting thing with the United States one, I thought was kind of interesting, was that the English deal, I mean, I say not United States, about English language. On the other side was the Russian language. So we're looking at the Spanish is there, English, Russian, Chinese, and then we have the Hebrew, and then we have the Sanskrit, and then we have Arabic. And I'm trying to think of the one in Africa that's spoken, and I can't think of it. That's the 8 languages. So this is to basically what's happening is simply is most people have an idea of the English language. Even in Europe and in other places, they have bits and pieces they know of English. Naturally, most of South America is Spanish, and almost all of Central America is Spanish. The only country I know that is not those countries that are basically Brazil being Portuguese. And then you have Suriname, and you have Guyana, and you have French, I guess it was the other country where Johnstown is, Guyana, where all the tragedy took place. The rest of South America is all Spanish, and all of Central America is Spanish. And so the only two major countries in the northern part are what we call the America and Canada. And you have part French also in Canada. So I've kind of gotten away. But here's the point. When I was talking with other people, they just didn't want to be there. They came there almost as though it was a photo shoot, and they were out of there. Meaning that simply is that it was too hot or humid for them. And it didn't take long for them to come and go. And I was getting ready to leave, actually. And I felt frustrated because simply I hadn't met anybody who I felt was really actually open to anything. The people I talked to just were not, they just didn't see it. So, when you got people who are closed-minded, there's no sense in talking on a deeper level with people. You figure that real quick. And so there was no one really to contact or talk to until I met a lady and her daughter who came from the state of New York. And I was actually getting ready to get in my car. I actually opened up the door, and I said I'd speak to her and see what happened, and then I'm leaving. And so I spoke to her, and she said she's from the state of New York. And I said, oh, okay. And we sort of dialogue a little bit there, and then it just got deeper. And she said, well, you believe all this stuff to do with the mass? And I says, no, it's all fake. And she said, yeah, it's a fake deal. It's not anything to do with anything reality. And so we got deeper. We talked about certain issues, and I shared with her certain people that I thought would benefit for her. I tried to explain to her the United States has never been a country. I mean, really actually been free. And we talked about that being a British colony. The United States never won the war. We go into what we call the Corporation of America in 1871. Everything changed dramatically during the war between the states. That's where the real revolution took place in this country. Although the groundwork had already been laid by the education that is government education. So, and that's a red flag for anybody in a public schooling or whatever, is that you think that the government's not going to be biased in any way or the other, when reality is simply it is going to be biased. And that's part of what we have supposedly here in the United States at one time, was that government radio was not involved, or television. It was all a private enterprise. It was people who went out and said, look, I'd like to own a radio station. I've got some money, and I want to transmit a certain station. I mean, have a radio station, a call letter, such and such. But they also put themselves under the binding of having to have a radio license. So, and that's a key word, license. You have to have a license in order to do anything. Well, why do you have to have a license, you see? Well, this is all about the fictitious world that we live in. And everything's based upon paper. And everybody's believing everything that's on paper to be real, when reality simply is natural law, meaning nature, and how we conduct business one-on-one with real entities, people, is no longer, you see. So we talked for, I guess, 35 to 40 minutes. And her idea simply is that her daughter was going to go, she was on the way to Florida, and she had her daughter, and she was going to check out a college there for her to go to. And she was seriously considering moving to Florida. And this was part of the whole idea. But I asked her simply, is that your idea from your heart or your mind? In other words, are you doing this because this is what you think up here, or is it, where's your heart at? And she said that she said she was kind of torn. I said, well, what's it like where you're at? She said, well, there's a community. We are like-minded where I'm at in New York, in upstate New York. She told me it's somewhere in the area of Syracuse, New York. But the point, that's not the point. But her point was simply is that they grow vegetables and there's a close continuity or knit with her neighbors. And I said, well, then why would you want to leave? And she said, well, it's just New York State. And I said, well, I understand that part of it, but you're going to have, and I understand that the taxes are high in New York, far much. Here in South Carolina, taxes on a property where I live at are far, far cheaper than probably the rest of the country, unless those states are trying to entice people to come in. So South Carolina is, that wise is not heavily involved with property tax. Many people pay, $4 or $5 grand a year for property tax when it's around here it's $300 a year, you see. And I don't live in the city, such and such. I live outside the city. So, so we talked about that. I talked to her about how we're divided as a child, psychologically, how we've been brainwashed to the point simply is that's why people don't even know themselves, so they go to a psychiatrist. That's a red flag. We actually have been so split already in our own minds that we're no longer whole, and we doubt who we are. And so when we doubt, we begin to look at each other and say, well, who am I? Why am I here? And what is my purpose? Well, most people don't even ask those questions anymore. They're just like a robot that keeps going down the assembly line. And as I've lived over 60 years, I've seen the destruction of what I call how we have been taught, because we have been taught at an early age to look at things and see them as different. That is the building blocks, and immediately we don't look at these. We look at triangles and squares and rectangles and stuff like that and see if they fit into this particular box, such and such. And we're taught to see everyone different than us. And so that causes somewhat of a split. And so what you're looking at a lot of times, which is part of what I struggle with, is to the dilemma simply is, so who are you? You're a different color than I am. Or are you? So, and where do you go to school at? Did you go to school? What kind of education you have? So what kind of life, what kind of job you have? These are all questions that go back to your kindergarten or 1 year old deal. You're trying to fit this person in a particular box. So you're looking always at the differences of people instead of seeing the similarities. And that's where it happens, right there. It begins right there. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It happens even before then. It happens when parents, mamas and dads, are in some way trying to, the child is in his own world. It's happy as long as it's got food, water, whatever, and the diapers change, such and such. But the point simply is that it's almost as though the parents are already pushing their programming upon, in fact, it is upon their child. That's what they're doing. They don't even know it. They don't even realize they're doing it. And unless the child is very strong at that point, they're going to reject that. And part of that also during the teenage years is to reject that somewhat of what parents are. Well, that's your rules, not mine. And so there's what I call a rebellion that takes place in the teenage years, saying, no, I'm not going to live like you, such and such. I've been in your house, such and such. And eventually people, they eventually depart. And that's what I would call somewhat the strong ones, or what we call the rebels, that is being teenagers. And it should take place in our lives, such as this, but it doesn't go far enough, you see, because eventually if they go out on their own, they're going to be in the system anyway. And so even for me, I made a decision because I learned a lot of things from my parents, good things and bad. One of the things simply was that I worked for my dad. So I knew what business is all about, as small businesses. I did everything in a small business and learned how to do things such and such, and saw how cruel the government can be. And I saw that with my small business, that is, with my father, such and such. And it taught me some things that I didn't want to be a part of the system anymore. And what do you mean by that? Well, I don't work for some organization that actually destroys others. I'm not interested in doing that. I'm not in the medical field. Okay. I have no desire to be in the medical field because I don't see anybody being healed in the medical field. And those who make that money, such and such, that's your prerogative, your choice, such and such. But the point simply is, guess what? You're not solving the problem in the medical field. You're making people more dependent upon them. And part of the reason why people come there is because the programming, the part of simply is the uniforms that people wear in the hospitals. Notice the colors they wear. The color is white, folks. It's all white. The only colors I recognize differently are in the emergency room, and I think they wore a different type of uniforms. And they've changed colors, yes, but many of your doctors and your nurses still wear, the graduates have changed the nurses, but at one time it was all white. Well, what does white mean in the childlike mind? It means purity, someone you can trust. Think about even the priests. They wear white. The color itself distinguishes in your mind, thinking in that same sphere that is being white, it is pure. It's a part of what we call virginity in some ways, being innocent. We see that. That's why a wedding takes place, that the woman wears a white dress. It's a symbol of purity, but it's not really that now. But it once was a sign of purity. And so this is how people get confused. And they think because a doctor's gone, he went 4 years of regular school, college, that is. So let's say that's 16 years because he's already went 12 years, if not more, in regular school. Then he goes 4 years, and then he goes approximately another 3 to 4 years, 2 years in certain areas, and then sometimes even longer than that, 4 years more. So how long has he gone? Well, he spent 20 years of his life, more than 20 years of his life, 22 years. And if he goes in a speculative area, even further. And so they're seen as the authorities because they've been educated. See, we're all been taught that the more educated you are, the wiser you are. No, it doesn't mean that. It means quite the opposite. That means that simply as people have accepted whatever's been taught to them in order to get a job, in order for them to be at a higher plateau in the working world. That's what it's about. But in our eyes, simply as children and as we learned young, that's why we were taught, do not trust certain people. Even I was taught, do not take candy from strangers. Because candy was a way of a bribery, or to basically you risking something good that the person who's doing this is going to manipulate you and can take you and take you away. So all these, the color white is always that way. And then you have the different colors of uniforms. You have the colors. Well, what about the colors in a court system? Have you ever noticed that? The court system, the judge wears all black. That should be a signal to you to see simply is, wait a minute here. Why is it all black? Now, is it because simply he is non-discriminative? He's, right and left, he's right and wrong? Or is it something else deeper here? Is he really looking out? Is he going to really be impartial somewhat into justice? Although we claim that the jury makes decisions, but a lot of that just simply is pressure put on so many people, such and such. And then you're basically, if you have any type of viewpoints, you're no longer allowed to be a juror. You're not. If you have a bias in any area, they will push you out. They'll ask you for that, you see. So even though the biases may be advantageous for that case, but they want people who are non-biased. Well, the folks, there's nobody non-biased out there. See, it's a facade per se, and they give that power supposedly to the jury, such and such, da 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 da, and you think you're doing something right, such and such. But anyway, I was glad that I waited around and I got a chance to talk to this lady. The daughter was there. She didn't really make too many make any comments. She's very young, naturally, and probably thinks her mother has gone cuckoo in some ways if she's been taught in a public school system. So her parent mom has gone crazy, although maybe she's not. My thinking simply is that I have already communicated to her by email and gave her some information, and it's up to her whatever she wants to do. So, so it's about a 2-hour trip up there and a 2-hour trip back. So one of the things I discovered also with my trip is that I don't see as well as I used to. My eyes are not what they used to be. And so I've ordered some glasses recently, but I having some difficulty for seeing. And this has made it a lot harder for me to drive. And why it's really frustrating now to even be on the highway, especially a 2-lane highway where people are not very patient anymore. Because I was behind someone else and I was going approximately 60 miles per hour. Well, the speed limit's 55. I'm going over the speed limit. What's the rush? But I had someone who was on my tail end and put pressure on me, which I never passed a person such and such because I eventually was going to turn off. But I can feel the energy with people all around me. And there's nervousness, there's fear, there's anxiety all around me. Now, when I was at the Georgia Guidestones, there was no one I saw that had a mask on. No one. Who would want to wear a mask in 90-degree weather and the humidity is over 50%? But there are people who do that. And the other guy I talked to briefly, he was from Chattanooga, Tennessee. We talked for a little bit, but he held on to a thinking while we were there. He was a single guy. And his thinking was simply is that some of it has to be real. And I'm just, no, it's not. It can't be. Because he believes some of it's true. He doesn't believe all of it, but he believes some of it's true. He believes there's such a thing as the virus and such and such. So that's how he got talking. He was sharing about that because we were talking, me and a lady were talking about it. And we were basically saying it's not true. And we kind of asked him what he thought about it. And he says, well, I believe it is somewhat true, which I don't have a problem with him telling his truth, his values, or what he believes. It's fine. He does that. So I shared with him such and such a little bit, but I wasn't going to push the issue. At least he was looking out there, such and such. We all basically left at the same time because the rain began to pour. But I'm glad I went. I'm glad I got home safely, which is no longer a thrill. I used to enjoy driving. I don't enjoy it anymore compared to what's going on. It's worse now than it ever has been. People are, when I get on the interstate, people are I don't know what the hell they're involved in, but anyway, they go, in the state of South Carolina, simply, there used to be a highway patrol here and used to enforce that speed limits, but I haven't seen a highway patrolman anywhere anymore because there are either not enough of them or they've been pulled back because the money's tight, supposedly, which is another bogus deal. But anyway, that's another story. So if you got any questions, on this video I've shared with you, you're more than welcome to ask. I'm not I've seen a couple other things that stood out to me. There was what I sensed that when I visit to a grocery store, there are people going back to the mask. They're already going back to it. And so the maskless freedom we had here is in jeopardy because of people now are going back into it. And I don't even know if they, in fact, it's nothing. They're not even enforcing here in South Carolina. So this is them. They're self-imposing this upon themselves. That's what they're doing. They're choosing to believe the narrative that's being taught, being preached, or whatever you want to call from the media. And those of you out there in the media are doing this, you are part of the problem. And if this is for you to make money, you've lost your soul, because what you're doing is detrimental just for a stinking paycheck. And it's serious what you're doing, because you're deceiving people. And yes, somewhat you'll say, well, they're worthy, they're going to be deceived anyway. That's not the point. It's that you yourself, you're deceiving others, and you're pushing fear porn, and you're not even checking the facts. Most people in the media don't even check facts. They just simply say the authorities. Do you notice that? The words they use is simply the authorities say such and such. Well, the whole idea simply is this: you are the authority, not them. And until you get that in your mind and figure out that simply is you're the authority, and you always have been, and you've given it up to someone else, and it's time for you to take it back and see who you are, because you are the authority, and you always have been the authority. You have to give your power over to these people. And when you come to that point, simply knowing that you are the authority, they don't get that energy from you. They don't get that power from you. You see, that's part of the whole game here, is the energy has changed, and they want you to go into more and more fear. And when you go into more and more fear, what happens simply is this: you are no longer, you crunched up, and you basically are unable to make decisions. You no longer have well, maybe I should do this, maybe. And so you're caught in a whirlwind, such and such, and you're not making decisions anymore. You're just simply, well, I don't know what is true and what's not. And fear just keeps going further and further. And then eventually you don't socialize with people. And for example, a funeral is taking place for a neighbor here, and they want you to wear a mask and social distancing. Well, I'm not going to the funeral. And, you say, well, that's kind of cruel. And I'm thinking, no, that's your world, not my world. I'm not going to participate in that. And, I cared about the guy. We had good talks, such and such. But the problem simply is that people are in fear, and they're creating this world that I don't want to be a part of. And so that's part of this separation here also is taking place. You're going to have to, you can no longer, if you're in fear, you're not going to make good decisions. And when you're in fear, you're also going to make poor decisions, and you're going to go with the majority, when the majority in all outcomes, folks, has never been right. History points that out a lot of times, that the majority who thought, the mobs, whatever the word you want to call it, crowds, have never been right. And you don't go out and begging the government to, quote unquote, to help you, because you now are submitting to their authority, you see, when all we need is natural law. And until we get back to natural law, it's going to be nothing but chaos, because it's based upon man's law. That's simply it. And, natural law simply is to do unto others as you would like to be treated. So you don't do mean things or angry. You don't take out. You have this energy within you says, no, I will not do that. I will not cause harm to someone else. But if they try to harm me, then I will stand up for myself. So you have this whole thing of looking, okay, so you're in the middle. You're in the middle pillar, as they say, a middle power strength. So you're not on the right or left here. You're not you're not giving your power away, but yet you're not letting someone run over you. You see what I'm saying? So you're in the middle. You know who you are, and you're not going to let anybody transgress over you, you see. You got to stand up for yourself. And it's easy to basically, I won't do any harm to others. The other key simply is that you're in a defensive mechanism and saying simply is, but you're not going to do any harm to me neither. And if you do harm to me, they're going to be what I would call some type of causes that are going to prevent you from doing that. And you have to make that evident. If someone is, you have to warn them. And then the other thing we did talk about the woman simply is, and I'll stop here, the word no means no. And until people understand simply, no, you're not going to do that anymore. You're not going to do this shit anymore. Okay. And no is a word meaning you don't mess with me. And whatever you're doing out here, such and such, you're not going to participate and bother me because I said no. I don't participate in your game. I don't vote anymore. I don't give into your system of basically trying to hurt others. That's not my agenda. And if my agenda is that, you need to stop it. You need to stop harming other people. You see. So anyway, I'm glad I got home safe last night. Pretty beat, pretty tired. And so I'm going to look into some other things, but ley lines interest me. But remember what I said earlier here is that, as I shared with her, this is psychological. And I shared earlier, the psychological warfare. This is all psychological. This is all, this is, where's the evidence of this whole thing, you see? So this is psychological. This is messing with people's minds. And they know that because you're divided. And so what you need to do is become whole again. Richard Rose talks about that. There are other teachers out there that talk about it, but Richard Rose is primary to me to come to the point simply is that you were born whole here. Get back to what you were before, innocent and whole. Whole meaning WHOLE. You're not divided. Okay. Wish you a great day. Enjoy your day. Take care. Thank you.